Oh boy, what do we got here? We got a table full of toys. And today on Nomad Outdoors, we're going to be talking about knives. Everybody likes to talk about knives. So let's get to it. Well, welcome to this week's edition of Nomad Outdoors. We are up here at the Nomad Outdoors base camp. We just got a bunch of snow yesterday, and we're looking to take the dog out for a walk in the woods a little bit later today. But in the process of that, started sharpening some of my knives last night, and I thought to myself, I go, wow, what a great episode it would be to talk about knives. And when I talk about knives, knives are, they're a personal thing. They're like shoes, underwear. You're going to have your preference of what you like and what you don't like, and sometimes they like to sell you on all the bells and whistles and things that look cool, and then there are those that are actually practical. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today is the practicality of a survival knife. What am I going to carry into the woods that's going to work for me? That being said, what type of blade is functional for survival? Each different type of blade is going to give you a different aspect of how you're going to use it in the field. And sometimes you may have to carry multiple knives with you. Oh, carry multiple knives? Oh, wow, that's really going to hurt my feelings. I'm going to start off with Topz Knives. T-O-P-S, Topz Knives. They make some really good quality knife. I have background in attending survival schools and preparedness schools. And then our show always lists On Point Tactical. Kevin Reeve is a good friend of mine. I've trained under him for years and years and years on different types of employing survival skills to tactical situations, whether it be in the rural setting or the urban setting. And lots of cool stuff that's out there. Check him out. Kevin Reeves, On Point Tactical. Look him up on the internet. You can find them. Do some training with them. That being said, the predecessor to my survival training started with the Tom Brown Jr. Survival School in New Jersey. One of the things that I got turned on to from them was King of the Mountain Wool. Look that up. That's some good stuff right there. And the other one was Topz Knives. So, Topz Knives. Say, just get to it. Cruel dog, quit babbling. That being said, this is probably my favorite survival tool that I have. And the reason that I say survival tool, and it's not a big, gaudy Rambo knife or whatever the case may be, this knife, when you think about a survival knife and what is going to function for you, you need to understand that in a survival situation, you're going to be skinning critters and gutting critters and making traps and finessing any type of equipment that you might be needing to make to procure your food. We talked about that in our last episode on bags. Remember, the basic fours of survival are shelter, water, fire, food. Well, part of food is having a knife that can help you to prepare that food. Now, so what's good about this knife? What's good about this knife is a high carbon steel. Okay, it has a thick blade to it, which means, am I actually going to be shaving with this? No, but here's the problem that you have is a lot of people put out a survival knife that has a very thin blade on it. And when you try to, even something as simple as try to start a hole in a tree so that you can get, put in a maple syrup tap, or you're going to put a bow hanger up in your tree, you need to have a knife that's not going to break. And the thinner the blade, the more risk there is for that blade to be able to break. The thicker the blade, the less chances of that blade breaking. So this is made by Topz Knives. It is the Tom Brown version Scout knife, and it comes in a handy dandy little I think they call this a Kydex sheath. And so let's talk about the edge on this blade. I've got this in a use. Here's a perfect example. So I use a Lasky knife sharpener. An Alaskan knife sharpener has a clamp that you can put on it, which gives you different degrees that you're going to sharpen your knife on. I could tell you that your survival knives, your survival tool type knives are going to be basically at a 30% angle. Okay, the thinner the edge, the more razor-like it's going to be. You'll drop down to a 25 or a 20, and it goes all the way down to a 17. And when you're talking getting down to that low, to that fine of an edge, the edge is really brittle. It's very sharp, but it's very brittle. On this knife, on my survival knife, this has a 30% angle. Angle is the word that we're looking for. So it's got a 30% angle on it. And this helps to have a more sturdier edge, but it's also, you can't get it as sharp enough to shave with. You can get pretty sharp. I mean, this one's got a pretty decent edge on it, and it might take off some thicker chest hairs, but I don't know about the fine arm hairs. But that's at a 30%er. And the other thing that we talk about with that survival knife is if you have something that's too long and too bulky, it's hard to work on the finer skills of making primitive traps that you're going to be making out of sticks and limbs and cutting small pieces. So the finer art of whittling, so to speak, is going to be better done with a smaller knife. Now, the heavier jobs, this knife's not necessarily going to cut the mustard for the heavier jobs. So this is basically knife number one that you should have in your pack. Not this knife per se, but a knife like this. Something that is small, easily maneuvered and manipulated so that you can work on the finer skills of survival when you're in the wilderness. All right, our next step up on knives and survival knives is going to be, here we see here, going to be something for doing the heavy job. Now, this is the tracker knife. This is the heavy duty, meaty one. If you've ever seen the movie The Hunted, that's where you're going to see this knife is in the movie The Hunted. Good knife. Awful bulky and awful heavy. This more works as a hatchet than it does anything else. Sometimes my belief with the whole thing is to carry a knife specific for the job that you're going to do. So that being said, if I'm going to carry something to do the heavy work, I might as well carry me a tomahawk. And I've got two of these. This one is made by Cold Steel. I've got another one that's made by SOG. And this is actually going to do the job that you want to do. You've got a little bit more leverage on the handle. You could use it if you have to fight off a bear. I've got to put another edge on this one. This needs to be sharpened. I'm beating the piss out of this thing. It used to have a little knuckle that was on the back end of it, a little hammer piece that broke off. And you can see that it's not exactly true in line with the handle anymore, but I use the heck out of this thing for a lot of stuff. So there's for the bigger jobs. So if you're looking at making yourself a shelter and you're going to make it out of wood, this knife here, a nice heavy duty thick blade, this is going to work for you. And you could cut logs with this. It's got a cross-cut saw edge on the back side of it. It doesn't work as good, but if you're going to chop, okay, probably going to be better off with having something along the lines of a tomahawk. This knife is okay, but if you're going to get a knife that's heavy duty, the Rambo blade isn't going to cut. It's not going to cut through some thicker trees. It's not going to cut down limbs because it doesn't have any weight to it. This one has weight to it. Pretty heavy. This one works better. Tomahawk. Good deal. Fire. Now I'm going to need a smaller knife to make, if you're going to make Bodro fire. You're going to have a fireboard. You're going to have to make a spindle. You're going to have to do some fine cutting. This is the knife that's going to help you out to make the tools to make that. You know, either, or if I've got to shave off some bark or get something as a fire starter, you're going to need a little finer tool. So there's really the two things we really think about it from a survival situation is I need something to do the heavy work and something to do the light work. So now I'm carrying myself two knives. Old Mr. Black Bear or Mr. Bobcat or old Mr. Coyote. And it doesn't happen that often in Michigan. But if you talk to my buddy Gray Bear, he'd like you to believe that I'm scared to death of critters that can eat me. But that there's a certain amount of caution that you should have. You know, because there are bad things that can happen in the woods, and the best thing is to be prepared for them. So that being said, I usually carry some sort of knife on me that, in a worst case scenario, I can stab and defend myself with. And this is where you more or less start to get into the whole Rambo knife type situation. Now these knives can be really good for self-defense, but you know, for survival, they get a little bit tough. They get a little bit difficult for survival. You can do certain things with them, but the blades are brittle, and the blades can break, even if they're stainless steel or whatever strength that they make them to. They can still break. But having something that you can stick a bear with that is going to attack you, or a coyote, or a wolf, all depending on what area that you live in. You got to have something that you need to be able to defend yourself in, and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to defend myself with a bear, a knife. You know, if a bear is attacking you, I can easily just kind of just like, you know, ultimately, hopefully I would have a firearm with me. But something to think about with all of these is having these tools readily available to you. For any given purpose or any given situation. You know, we carry our knives, but they're in our backpacks. We may carry a sidearm, but it's on our waist, all bundled up in our coat that we can't get to. You know, anything that you're going to have to use out there and use it quickly, it has to be readily accessible. So think about that in correlation to your packs. How are you going to set stuff up at? Oh, and I got my old backpack back here because we talked about this last time. On the shoulder of my backpack, I carry, and I'm a fan of Cold Steel. Cold Steel makes a really good product for the average Joe Blow that doesn't cost $1 million. They're a little bit on the more expensive side, but you get what you pay for in knives. So that being said, I'm a pretty big fan of Cold Steel. Now this Cold Steel knife I carry on my shoulder, but basically it's just it's basically just a stab knife. I can use it as a survival knife because it's got a nice decent thickness on the blade, and it's got a nice hardiness to it, so I could use it for some finer skills. I'd have to watch so that I don't cut myself while using it because it doesn't have a traditional handle. But when I'm moving through the woods and I need to get to a knife, I've got my knife right here on the shoulder of my backpack. What else do we have? We talked about, well, this is a Columbia River Knife and Tool Company. Columbia River Knife and Tool. That's basically what it is. So it's they call them cricket knives. So this is made by Columbia River. This one does have a tendency to go into the woods with me. But the one I carry more often on my waist belt is, oh look, another Cold Steel knife. I like this one because it has a rubber handle and it's very sticky, and it has a texture to it that's easy to hold on to when your gloves are frozen and it's cold outside. But something that's easily accessible. It doesn't have a latch on the sheath, so it just draws right out and it can sit there deep inside. Now we get, this is a fancy knife. This is just for show and tell. Bought this one on the internet. I had a guy at the self-defense school that I teach at. He had a guy that had one of these knives, and I just liked the look of it. And I said, well, I'm going to get me one of those. It was only 20 some bucks online. Some guy makes it in Japan, and it I really liked it. I really liked it, so I bought it. So this is a knife that Jer Bear carries with him, and there's some really cool things about this knife. This one's made by SOG. That little hook that's on there is what's called a gut hook. So you basically would start yourself, when you're gutting out a critter, you would start yourself a little spot, and then you would, you'd cut it and you get your fingers inside the skin, and then hook this in there, and then you would basically just, put your fingers in there and run this down the gut, and that would open it up. Something to think about, we had talked about in survival situations as well, is skinning. The smaller the knife you have, the more difficult it is for skinning. Like this one has a bit of a rounded edge to it. If your edge has a straight edge to it or a point, it's harder to gut. Let's say that, or to skin. Like this would not be a good skinning knife. You need something that has a nice round edge to it, so that you can slice all that inner connective tissue off of the skin as you're skinning. Anyway, so this one's made by SOG, and the thing that I like about this one, and I'm going to figure out how he works it here, is the blade is reversible. So the blade is reversible on this one. There's a little, and it's kind of hidden, but there's a little hidden secret button that's right here. Basically, you push on this little lever here, and look what you get. You get yourself a crosscut saw. And that is another discussion. Anytime that you're out there and thinking of survival or hunting, having a crosscut saw in your pack is going to be extremely versatile for either clearing shooting lanes or making a blind, whatever that you may need to do. You can't always chop something. Sometimes you need to cut something. So saw, really good idea. This is his that's made by SOG, which is actually pretty cool because it's reversible. And he carries this on his backpack or on his fanny pack, and it's reversal. So he's got something that he can defend himself with, something that he can cut and work with. A little bit thin on the blade side. Something to take into consideration. We talked about that. But that's a pretty decent tool that's right there. Here's my crosscut saw, and mine comes with just a little bit more heavy duty, but having a crosscut saw, I've got it, and this sits in my backpack. This is what I would call my second tier pack, and this is it's a decent knife. This is made by, I don't even know who, but it's fairly inexpensive. I had another one, but I broke the blade on it that had a screw handle in the back of it back here, so you could tie in a broom handle, so that would give you some range. These are good things to have in your pack as well. All things blades, all things blades. So we're getting smaller and finally getting down to, what do we carry for a pocket knife? Oh, the old Swiss Army knives. And this may not be made by Swiss Army. This is like the first variation of the multi-tool. So you've got a fork, a spoon, a wine cork remover, has a, there it is, has a blade on it, has a can opener slash bottle opener, and those of us that are in the military would understand how important those two things are. It separates, so it can come into two different sections. So you can eat with your spoon and your knife at the same time, or your spoon and your fork at the same time. And any number of Swiss Army tools have any number of different models and variations on them. That being said, as Swiss Army knives grew into something new, we got into the Leatherman tools, or the multi-tools, which are just a spin-off from a Swiss Army knife. Multi-tools are nice because they have pliers and wire cutters. And let's just say for some reason that you were out hunting and your dog got caught up in barbed wire, you're going to have something to cut that barbed wire to get it untangled from your dog. Or yourself. Maybe you get caught in barbed wire. Who's not quite sure. Again, these setups can come in any different style that you want. You can add things, delete things, put things in there. This one has a straight edge knife, 2 flathead screwdrivers, an awl, a file, and a serrated edge, and a crosscut saw, and my Phillips head, and a bottle can opener. So this is the Leatherman Super Tool. I like this one. You can get in black. You can get in this one. And Leatherman, they're putting out some pretty good tools that are out there. Remember though, ultimately, these are some of the nicer things to have in the field, but we're still boiling down to, you know, I'm still going to need my basic survival tools. Can I get by in the woods with this? Absolutely. I can do everything that I need to with this, more or less. But I also need to think about, how am I going to defend against Mr. Bad Boy Bear or Cougar or Wolf or Coyote? All the way down. So we went past the Swiss Army knife. We went past the Leatherman tool. Now we're going to pocket knives. So pocket knives are basically something that you're going to carry every day, every day, every day, every day. Now, we want to pay attention to what we get in pocket knives because we don't want to violate any laws. 2 different types of pocket knives. One you can have for a tool. This is the one that I use, again, made by Cold Steel. This is the Recon 1, and this is carried in my right pocket. I've got this with me all of the time. It is basically anytime that you need a knife, you know, I'm sure your great-grandpa and your grandpa and all your grandpas before him told you that any good boy, any good man always has a pocket knife because you just never know when you're going to need it. Secondary to that, now this is a manual open. This is what they call an assist open, which means that there's a little lever that's on the back of the thing. I pull it and it opens it up. So this one is the self-defense knife. So this one, like any samurai, would carry 2 blades with him. So as do I carry 2 blades. My primary blade and my secondary blade. Those are pocket knives, and those can come in any fashion or form. That being said, probably one of the most important things that you can think about when it comes to a knife is the knife hardness or thickness of the blade and the ability to be able to sharpen it. High carbon steel is a little bit harder to sharpen than some of the stainless steel. That being said, I have found the biggest problem that I have noticed with knives is that the blades are too thin or too brittle. I've definitely sold on the Topz knives because these I still have after years and years and years of use, and they've never broken on me. Having the right tool for the right job when you're out there in the field when it comes to knives is definitely could be the difference between life or death. You know, having things in your backpack that are going to help you to survive many different situations, whether it be something as simple as trying to fix something simple on your truck to get it started to get out of the woods, or untangling yourself from wire, clipping things. You know, having the right tool for the right job is helpful. I'll sum everything up with what gets carried with me into the woods. First thing is pocket knife. Second thing is multi-tool. Third thing is survival knife. Fourth thing is heavy duty survival tool. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is self-defense. Keep in mind that you cannot carry a fixed blade knife on you walking around in the city. That's a violation of law. You can, though, while you're out performing outdoor wilderness activities, carry a straight edge blade out there in the real world. So they give you a good sum up of knives and tools to take into the woods. Or Lansky, L-A-N-S-K-Y, sharpeners. It comes in this little case like this that I have here. There are different edges, different stones, and you put your knife in here, and you just choose the angle, and it maintains the angle so that you have a common angle, so that you can have a nice smooth edge on it. I have a Spyderco knife that requires a 20-degree angle edge on it. So that's a really, really fine edge, and it's a thinner blade. This knife is made by Kershaw, and this one I have a 25% grade on it, or angle on it, and then my Cold Steel has a 30-degree angle on the blade. So what's the difference with all these blades? Well, when you get into sharpening, a 30% is going to be stronger, 20% is going to be finer, not as strong, 20% is super fine and not very strong at all. So you have to depend on what you're using with it. There are three different stones that go along with this one, with the little guides that are on here, and this is the Lansky. You have your standard sharpening stone. This one I carry in my backpack because if you need to sharpen a knife in the woods, this basically is like a pen, but I can extend it or retract it, and I use carry that in the woods so I can sharpen my knife while in the field, something that I didn't talk about before. Get yourself some honing oil so that when you're sharpening your blades, you can get them nice and sharp. There's one other thing that I was going to talk about. One, if you don't ever know what the edge, what the grade or the edge is on your knife, what I would do in using the Lansky is I would take a marker and cover the sharpened edge of the blade with a marker. That way, when I put it into the sharpener, you hear my bird chirping in the background. That way, when I put it into the sharpener and I go to sharpen the edge, I can see, based on how much of the black ink it takes off of it, I can see what edge it actually came with from the factory. That's just a little cheat mode for you. Something to work with. That's my talk on knives. Fast and furious. Not a lot of names that are thrown out there. So be safe with knives. Always sharpen away from yourself. Don't poke yourself. Don't cut yourself. The one thing that you will do, the more you get into knives and sharpening them, you're going to cut your finger and you're going to go, that's a stupid thing. So don't do those things that are going to cause you to cut your fingers. That all being said, that's it. That's it for knives and Nomad Outdoors. Check out On Point Tactical. That's a good place to go to get some good knowledge. A lot of what I learned about knives and sharpening knives came from Kevin Reeves at On Point Tactical, and check them out. Until next time, stay nomadian.